Hi, I'm Tom at San Diego Solid State. Today we're going to do a dial glass replacement on the Pioneer SX-750. Now before we begin, I will say that this procedure is going to work pretty much the same way for all the Pioneer SX-50 series of receivers. This will work equally well on the 650, the 450. The only difference is going to be the number of knobs that you have to remove. But ultimately the front plate is going to come off just as easily, and so you can use these instructions for those models as well. Before we dive into the receiver, you're going to want to gather your materials. The first thing you're going to want is a towel or something to lay out all your materials on so they don't get scratched. You're going to need some safety glasses, a 14 millimeter or 9/16 inch socket driver, a Phillips screwdriver, some clear caulk or other adhesive, some Q-tips, a heat gun or a hair dryer, if that's all you have, a plastic putty knife or some other similar tool that's plastic that won't scratch metal. You're going to want a glass cleaner and cloth, and a blank sheet of paper. And last but definitely not least is you're going to want some replacement glass. Now, if you've already purchased a piece of glass from us on eBay at San Diego Solid State, great, you've come to the right spot. If you need glass, you can check us out. Again, eBay, San Diego _Solid State, or you could try and go to your local glass shop and see if they could fabricate something like this for you. But if you do that, you're definitely going to want to take very detailed measurements of the original glass that's in there now. So before you start unscrewing things and taking stuff apart, the first thing you want to do is stay organized, because a lot of these buttons and knobs look the same. So you're going to want to have a plan for sorting them out and putting them back on. So the first thing you should do is take your blank sheet of paper and just make a note of each type of knob. So as you can see, going from left to right, we have speakers, bass, treble, balance, volume, function, and then the tuner. So as you take the knobs off, go ahead and lay them on the piece of paper just like they are here. Now these might take a little bit of elbow grease, depends on how long they've been on there, but they should pull off. None of these have screws or any other hardware to keep them on. So you just pull them straight off, just like that. Oh, okay, so here's our first problem, and here's something that can happen with these units. The interior is a plastic piece that actually goes on the post, but the outside is a metal sleeve, and so if the glue is deteriorated, that's going to come off. So we'll deal with that separately later, but just keep the pieces together for now. And that's step one. Now the next step is to start unscrewing things, starting with the case. So on the side of the wooden case, there's 4 screws, 2 on either side, and this just lifts straight off. Now your receiver hopefully looks a little bit different inside. I've really gutted this unit, doing a bunch of other work on it, so mine's kind of a mess, but yours will look nice and clean hopefully. But the next thing you're going to want to undo is you're going to take your 14 millimeter socket and you're going to undo the 2 screws here and here. Now if you're like me and have just standard depth sockets, it might be a little bit too shallow to handle this post. So these generally aren't on here super tight. So you can try and just pop on there and just turn it. And for me, that works fine. The other thing I will note is if you really want to use a proper socket here, don't be tempted to use a wrench, because if you get on there with a wrench, you're going to scratch up the sides of your nice shiny front faceplate here, and you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you're using a nice smooth socket. Make sure there's no scratches or burrs on this, and if you do that, you should be totally fine, no worries. Next, you have 2 screws on the top here. And here. So once you got the 2 nuts removed and the 2 screws on top, it should slide right off. And if you still have the feet on the bottom, it should come off pretty easily. I already took the feet off of mine, so I had to lift it up a little bit, but it just comes right off like that. And then just lay it face down on your towel. So there are 2 washers that are on the inside of the front face, and sometimes they're stuck onto the back of this and other times they're not. So if they fall out when you pull this on or when you pull it off, just put them back on the the 2 posts where the nuts were. So you'll notice that this unit doesn't actually have any glass in it anymore. When I got it, glass was already broken. What you'll do with your unit is you really don't care about saving the glass at all, so don't stress too much about whether it breaks into a million pieces. Obviously, it's easier the bigger the pieces are to come out. But, for purposes of this, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get your heat gun and your putty knife and just start at one corner and just heat up the glue. All this brown glue is really the problem that you're trying to solve, and you sort of start prying up. You just heat up the glass and the glue along here and just trying to work under it. And again, you might end up with 10 or 15 different pieces of glass, but it's fine because you're getting rid of it, so no worries. Once you have your glass out, it's time to get ready to put the new glass in. And so the first thing you're going to want to do is just give this a quick clean, make sure there's no fingerprints on it. And I just use rubbing alcohol, but you can use Windex, whatever your favorite glass cleaner is, and you just give it a little spray. And with your cloth, just give it a little wipe down. You're going to want a lint-free cloth here. If you try and use Kleenex or a paper towel or something like that, you're going to end up with a bunch of little fibers in there that are going to drive you nuts once it's on there. So you're going to do both sides, and just at this point you're only going to want to touch it by the edges so you don't get any more fingerprints on it. Okay, take a look at it. Now it's looking pretty good, nice and clear. Okay, and then the next thing you're going to want to be really careful about is to make sure this hole is going in the right direction. So take your face frame and make sure it's lined up. So the hole goes right above where the function knob is. So we're lined up there, looks good. So we're going the right way. So next we're gonna talk about the adhesive. So I'm just using plain clear caulk. You can get this anywhere. This is kitchen and bath. It's fine. It could be indoor, outdoor. It doesn't really matter. You just want to make sure that it's clear, just in case you get a little bit of squeeze out. It's not visible. So we want to apply this very sparingly and very carefully. This is, because this doesn't need to be super strongly held on. It's not bearing weight. There's no pressure on it. Really, this is just to keep this piece of glass from falling out under its own weight. So you don't really need very much. You need just enough to kind of tack it in there. And so this particular brand comes out white and then dries clear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little blob of this silicone onto my piece of paper that I have set aside with my knobs on it. So this is a close-up of what the edge looks like in here, right here. This flat bit is what the glass rests on, but you don't want to put the glue there because it's going to ooze out all over the place. What you want to do is kind of put it sort of on top of this raised bit. And then when you put the glass in, it'll squish down a bit and just get right in that corner. That's really the safest way to do it. So I'm brushing on the caulk with the Q-tip here, and if the Q-tip's not working for you, then you can use something else, but the trick is to just get a small amount right on the edge of that lip there, and just, you know, go down the line, don't use too much, and just keep working your way around. Then you just gently lower the glass into the frame. But you want it resting on this lip here, and you want it pretty much centered. There's nothing guiding it on either side, so you really just want it centered in here. And if you bought one of the replacement glasses from us, this hole is a little bit bigger than the factory, just to give you a little bit of extra wiggle room, but the knob's going to cover that up entirely, so you won't see it. So give it a little bit of a push down with your rag. Careful not to get that in anywhere. And then you pretty much just let it sit like that for 24 hours or so. I can already see I'm going to have a couple spots I'm going to need to clean up, and we'll cover that in the next step. All right, so it's the next day. Everything's looking pretty good. And if you want to sort of test out whether it is good, just flip it over, give it a little tap like that, and if it doesn't fall out, then you're good. Now, I do see a couple spots where a little bit squeezed out, and that's fine. We're going to take care of that right now. I'm going to do this on close-up so you can see it, but you want to get yourself a razor blade or an X-Acto knife, and you want to work it right up against the edge of the metal. You don't need to push hard, just maybe back and forth, just a couple of strokes like that, and then another bit like that, and it pops right off. So you can see it's right on the glass, or on the razor blade right there. So putting it back together is just the opposite of taking it apart, so we'll go ahead and do that real quick. Now, there are a couple tricks to getting these knobs back on. Depends on the type of knob, but for this one's pretty stiff, so it's hard to move. But what you want to do is put the knob on a little bit, and then turn this all the way to the left, and then turn it 2 clicks so that it's on the off. That way you can sort of push it on there, and that looks pretty good, so I don't have to adjust it, but you want to make sure that the line goes where it's supposed to go. Now with these ones have basically a full sweep. So what I typically do is put it all the way to the left. Take a look at your line here. You want to kind of look up under there and just check that it lines up with the 5, and then give it a sweep. You know, the main thing that you're going to want is that the topmost position, the center position, is as straight up and down as possible, and that looks pretty good. Here's that knob that came apart. So this is pretty straightforward. On the plastic bit, you can see there's this raised bit there, and then on the inside of this, there's a groove. So it basically works just like a slotted screwdriver. And so all you really need to do is get some super glue. It's probably the best for it. Just put a little bit of glue right on the top of it. And you want to make sure you're lined up with your groove and your tabs, and put it in there. Just drop it in there straight away. Push it down. And then you push it on the post and wiggle it to make sure that it's solid. Now, this Pioneer is one step closer to being fully restored. I hope you learned something today. If you have any suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. But otherwise, I wish you many years of enjoyment of your vintage audio gear.